Okay, so get ready to use those brains because we are diving deep into some super interesting stuff
Yeah.
this time around, reimagining education and trying to wrap our heads around how society really works. You sent in these excerpts from a college course, Life Skills for Modern Living, and selections from Max Weber's Economy and Society.
Two very different
Right,
things.
totally. But they both make you think about how we deal with this crazy world that never sits still.
Yeah,
I have
definitely.
to say, the life skills course really jumped out at me. AI in homemaking. Come on, that's not your average college class.
It's definitely different. Like, they're acknowledging that the way we've always done education, well, it's not really cutting it anymore. This course seems laser focused on flexibility and adaptability and always keep learning, always keep up. Those aren't just buzzwords, those are like the golden tickets in today's job market.
And don't forget about the tech. They're bringing in AI tools and online resources.
Yeah.
It's like they're not just talking about technology, they're making it a core part of the learning.
Yeah, it's one thing to teach someone how to use the latest app. It's another to really dig into what technology means for our lives. How does it change how we work? How does it change how we connect with each other? All those big questions.
It really makes you wonder what this means for someone who's about to graduate, go to college. What kind of edge does this give them in a world that seems to change every 5 seconds?
It's about giving them the tools to not just survive, but really thrive, to become these like super learners who can adapt to anything, which, let's be honest, is a pretty valuable skill no matter what you end up doing.
It's like they're providing a toolbox, right? Not just filling heads with facts, but giving them the skills to think for themselves, solve problems, navigate a world that's only getting more and more complex.
Exactly. And that takes us to our second deep dive, Max Weber's Economy and Society. Now, this one's a bit more, shall we say, intellectually demanding.
Yeah, I'll admit, when I first saw the excerpts, I was a little intimidated.
Yeah, it's dense stuff.
Yeah. But there was this one concept that really caught my eye. Weber talks about the bureaucratic phenomenon
Yeah.
and how it should be studied comparatively in a non-ideological way. I don't know why, but that phrase just hooked me.
That's classic Weber right there.
Yeah.
He's all about understanding how systems work, putting aside our own opinions or biases. It's like he's saying, here's the framework for understanding the machinery, the invisible stuff that shapes our choices even when we don't realize it.
It's like he's pulling back the curtain, right? Showing us the gears turning behind the scenes of power, economics, social structures. He talks about all these forms of domination, traditional authority, charismatic leadership, those bureaucratic systems we were just talking about.
And he digs deep into how these forms of domination, how they develop, how they play off of each other. He doesn't shy away from the messy stuff either, the power struggles, the ethical dilemmas. It's like he's saying, look, the world is complicated, and we have to be willing to look beyond the surface to really understand the forces that are shaping our lives.
So how does it connect back to what we're talking about with the life skills course? They both seem to be grappling with this idea that the world is in constant flux, and we need new ways of thinking and being to keep up.
That's a brilliant observation. Think about it. We were just discussing the changing job market, how what you learn in school doesn't always translate to the real world. Well, Weber helps us understand why those changes are happening. The rise of corporations, globalization, the way technology is changing the very nature of work. These are all part of this bigger picture of power and social organization that Weber was so keenly aware of.
It's like he's giving us this new lens to view the world through, right? Not just describing what's happening, but explaining why it's happening and how it all fits together.
Exactly. He's showing us how history, power dynamics, social structures, they all intersect and influence the world we live in. For example, he talks about how legal systems have developed over time, from their more primitive forms to the complex systems we have today. It highlights that even something like the law, which we often think of as objective and impartial, is actually shaped by social and historical forces.
So it's not enough to just understand the law as it exists today. We need to understand how it got that way, what forces shaped it, what values and beliefs are embedded in it. This is already making me rethink everything I thought I knew.
And that's precisely what makes Weber so relevant even today. He challenges us to question our assumptions, to look for the underlying structures, to understand the historical forces that are still shaping our present.
It's like he's giving us X-ray vision, allowing us to see the bones of society, the structures that are often hidden beneath the surface of everyday life.
And that kind of awareness, that ability to see the forest for the trees, is incredibly valuable. It allows us to make more informed decisions, to navigate complex systems more effectively, to advocate for ourselves and others, It's like he's giving us a roadmap, right, to navigate all the complexities of how society actually works. You start to see the patterns, the connections, how economics and politics and culture and law, they all kind of influence each other, all tangled up together.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to wrap your head around, but it really
Yeah.
opens your eyes too. Makes you wonder, though, if all these forces are so deeply rooted, so powerful, what can we even do as individuals? Like, do we have any real agency? Or are we just along for the ride?
That is the question, isn't it? The million-dollar question.
Mm.
And Weber, well, he doesn't exactly give us easy answers. He recognized that the systems we live in, they constrain us, they limit our choices. But he also believed in the power of individuals to understand those systems and to make choices within them, strategic choices.
So, not about tearing the whole thing down,
Hmm.
but more like learning how to play the game. Maybe even use the rules to our advantage.
That's the idea. And this is where it all circles back to the life skills course, right? That emphasis on critical thinking, problem solving, being adaptable. Those are the skills that empower people to navigate complex systems, whether it's the job market or a giant bureaucracy. Heck, even just the social dynamics of everyday life.
So it's like the life skills course is giving students the tools to not just function within the systems that Weber describes, but maybe even influence them, maybe even change them for the better.
Exactly. And that's where Weber's ideas get really interesting. It's not just about explaining how the world works, but about empowering us to imagine how it could be different.
It's like he's handing us the blueprints to the machine so we can start tinkering with it, figuring out how it works, what we can adjust.
I love that. And that tinkering, that questioning, that willingness to challenge the status quo, that's where social change comes from. Weber understood that social structures, they're not set in stone. They're constantly evolving, shaped by historical forces, by power dynamics, and yes, even by the actions of individuals.
It's not about accepting the world as it is,
Yeah.
right? But about understanding how we got here and then using that knowledge to imagine, to create something better.
Exactly. And this brings us to this idea of rationalization that Weber talked about so much. This idea that Western society has become more and more rationalized, focused on efficiency, on calculation, on control.
And he saw that as a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's led to advancements in technology, organization, all of that.
Yeah.
But also has this potential to lead to a sense of, I don't know, disenchantment, like a loss of meaning and purpose.
Exactly. He was worried that this constant push for efficiency and calculability could trap us in this iron cage, stifling creativity and spontaneity, our connection to, well, something bigger than ourselves.
Like we're trading off the magic of the world for a life that's predictable and efficient, but maybe ultimately less meaningful, less enchanting.
Yes. And this is where Weber's analysis becomes so relevant to our own lives. Because as we become more and more reliant on technology, as our lives become more structured, as we're constantly navigating complex systems and bureaucracies, how do we hold on to that sense of meaning and purpose? How do we avoid becoming just another cog in the machine?
Those are big questions.
Yeah.
And honestly, they feel even more relevant thinking about that life skills course. It's like they're trying to give students these tools to thrive in this increasingly rationalized world, but without losing sight of those essential human qualities, creativity, empathy, that search for meaning.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between the rational and the irrational, the efficient and the meaningful, the individual and the collective.
So we need to be aware of both sides and find a way to make them work together.
Right. And it's interesting, both the life skills course and Weber's work, they both seem to point toward critical thinking as this key skill for navigating the modern world. It's not just about what we know, it's about how we think, how we process information, how we question assumptions, challenge the way things are.
It's like we need to become more aware of the water we're swimming in, the currents, the undertows, so we can swim more effectively, and maybe even find a way to swim upstream when we need to.
Exactly. That awareness, that critical engagement with the world around us, that's where our power lies as individuals.
This is giving me so much to think about. Is there anything else from those excerpts that you sent over that really stood out to you, that feels connected to what we've been talking about?
There's this passage where Weber talks about Verstehen. It's often translated as interpretive understanding. Basically, he argued that to really understand social phenomena, we can't just observe what people are doing. We need to try to understand the meaning behind their actions, the subjective meanings they attach to their choices.
So not just what they do, but why they do it,
Yeah.
what motivates them, what beliefs, what values are shaping their actions.
Exactly. And it goes back to this idea that social structures aren't just these abstract things. They're made up of people, each with their own motivations, their own beliefs and desires.
So to understand how those systems work, how they change, how they might be influenced, we need to understand the people within them, right?
Hmm.
Understand their motivations, their hopes, even their fears.
Exactly. And that takes empathy, you know? That willingness to step outside of our own heads and try to see the world through someone else's eyes, to understand their perspective, even if it's different from our own.
It's like we need to become anthropologists of our own
Yeah.
societies, right? Observing, listening, really trying to understand the cultural codes, the unspoken rules, the shared meanings that shape how we interact with each other.
And that's not easy. But if we want to build a world that's more just, more equitable, more humane, it's essential. Weber believed that understanding was necessary, but not enough. He argued that by truly understanding the social forces at play, we could be more conscious, more deliberate, more effective agents of change.
So knowledge is power, but only if we use it wisely, ethically, and with that deep understanding of the human experience.
Exactly. And that brings us full circle back to that life skills course, with its focus not just on skills and knowledge, but on character development, ethical decision-making, a sense of responsibility to others.
It's like they're preparing students to be not just successful in their own lives, but to be responsible citizens, equipped to handle a complex world with both competence and compassion.
Yes, and that's a message that aligns so well with Weber's vision. A society where people aren't just cogs in a machine,
Hmm.
but active, engaged, ethically informed participants, working together to create a world that's more just and more humane for everyone.
It's like they're saying, look, the world's a complicated place, it's true, but we're going to give you the tools to make sense of it all, to find your way, and hey, maybe even shake things up a little bit, which is a very different message than just saying, okay, here's how to fit in, here's how to follow the rules.
Right, and that's something we need to hear more of because let's face it, a lot of the time it feels like those rules are rigged against so many people. And Weber knew that. He really understood how power gets concentrated in the hands of a few, how social structures, well, they can keep inequality going, and how all that can make people feel powerless.
Which brings us back to that big question, doesn't it?
Mhm.
What power do we actually have as individuals to change our own lives and change the world around us? Because if we're just products of our environment, shaped by forces we can't control, where's the hope in that? How can anything ever really change?
That's the heart of it, isn't it? And it's a question that Weber wrestled with constantly. He knew that we're not just these isolated individuals making choices in a vacuum.
Mhm.
Our choices, they're always influenced by the social structures we're a part of, the norms and values we've internalized, the power dynamics all around us.
So it's not about pretending those forces aren't there, but about understanding them, right? Maybe even figuring out how to use them to create the change we want to see.
Exactly. Weber believed that understanding those social forces, really getting them, was the first step to becoming more conscious, more deliberate, more effective in making change happen. He didn't pretend to have all the answers, no simple solutions, but he gave us something just as important, a framework for understanding, for critical engagement, for taking action from a place of knowledge.
So less about burning it all down and more about rolling up our sleeves, figuring out how the machine works, and maybe finding those pressure points where we can make a difference.
That's it. And that's where that life skills course, with all its talk about critical thinking and adaptability and ethical decision making, it all comes together. It's like they're handing students these tools to navigate this complex world, to recognize injustice and challenge it, and to find their own power within these systems, even the ones that seem so unchangeable.
It's like giving them a compass and a map and saying, listen, the journey's going to be tough, there will be obstacles, but you've got what it takes to find your way and maybe even clear a path for others to follow.
Beautifully put. And that's really the core of Weber's work, isn't it? Empowering individuals to be more aware, more intentional, more effective in shaping their own destinies and shaping the world they want to live in. He reminds us that social change is a process, an ongoing conversation between what individuals can do and the structures that surround them. And that even the smallest acts of resistance, of creativity, of just being kind, they can ripple outward and contribute to creating a world that's more just, more equitable, more fulfilling for everyone.
This deep dive has been quite a journey. We've covered so much ground from AI in the classroom to dissecting the very DNA of power structures. And somehow it all connects, which I think speaks to how relevant Weber's work still is today and how much we need a new way of approaching education, one that prepares people for the real challenges of the 21st century.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And if there's one big takeaway from all of this, is that we can't lose sight of our shared humanity, the values and beliefs that connect us, even when we disagree, and that incredible power we have when we work together to build a world that's more just, more equitable, and more meaningful for every single person.
That's a powerful note to end on, and one that I hope will stick with our listeners as they keep exploring these ideas. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with me. It's been an amazing conversation.
My pleasure. Until next time, keep those minds open and never stop asking those tough questions.